You do not expect a billionaire to die quietly. You expect lawyers, hospitals, machines keeping him alive past the point of dignity. You expect a fight. Gerald Whitmore did not go that way. He went in his sleep in his own bed, in a house that cost more than most people will earn in 3 lifetimes. And for a long time, the only person anyone looked at was the woman who had spent 11 years making sure that house ran without a single problem. Rosa Delgado arrived at the Whitmore estate in Greenwich, Connecticut at 6:47 in the morning on March 14, 2019. Same time she always arrived. She entered through the service gate, parked in the service lot, and walked through the side door she had used every weekday for over a decade. She made coffee. She folded the linens from the dryer. Then she climbed the east staircase to let Mr. Whitmore know his breakfast was ready. She knocked. No answer. She knocked again. Still nothing. When she pushed the door open, 63-year-old Gerald Whitmore was lying motionless in his bed. The room was cold. The windows were shut. There was no sign of struggle, no broken glass, nothing out of place. He looked like a man who had simply gone to sleep and never woken up. Within 48 hours, Rosa Delgado was the prime suspect in his death. Gerald Whitmore did not inherit his money. He built it over 4 decades of commercial real estate development that made him one of the most recognized names in New England finance. 11 commercial towers, 3 luxury hotel properties, a development firm with over 200 employees, a net worth north of $2.3 billion. He had been married twice, first to a woman named Catherine, who died of cancer in 2008 after 22 years of marriage. They had 2 children together, a son named Elliot and a daughter named Brielle, both adults by the time their father died. His second marriage, to a woman named Nadine Forsyth, lasted 4 years and ended in a quiet but expensive divorce in 2016. What Gerald kept afterward, according to the people closest to him, was a deep and lasting suspicion of people who wanted things from him. He was not an easy person to know. Former employees described him as exacting and quick to assume the worst. His longtime attorney Franklin Osei once said in a deposition that Gerald operated on the assumption that everyone around him had an angle. That included his staff. That included his children. That included, at times, Franklin himself. In a world like that, Rosa Delgado was unusual. She had worked for Gerald for 11 years and in that time had never once asked him for anything beyond her paycheck. By his standards, that made her the most trustworthy person in his orbit. She was the one who found him. She was the one who called 911. And she was the one who, when the toxicology report came back 3 weeks later, became the first person law enforcement focused on. Digoxin is a cardiac medication. In the right dose it slows and steadies the heart. In excess it stops it. Gerald Whitmore had no prescription for digoxin. His cardiologist confirmed he had never been prescribed it, never discussed it, and had no condition that would have required it. But it was in his bloodstream at nearly 3 times a lethal concentration. He had been poisoned. The question was not whether, the toxicology made that plain. The question was who had done it and how. Rosa Delgado fit every early marker. She was in the estate 6 days a week. She prepared Gerald's meals and managed his daily medications. She had unrestricted access to every room, including the kitchen and the master suite. She had a gate code. She knew his schedule down to the hour. And when detectives searched her apartment, they found a partially used bottle of digoxin tablets, prescribed years earlier to her late mother, who had suffered from atrial fibrillation. Rosa said she had simply kept them with her mother's belongings after she passed and never thought to throw them out. Investigators found that explanation useful in all the wrong ways. She was brought in for questioning 3 times in the first 2 weeks. Each session lasted hours. Her account did not change. She had arrived at her regular time. She had found Mr. Whitmore unresponsive. She had called for help immediately. She had not given him anything unusual. She had not entered the master suite the night before. She had no reason to hurt him. And yet the pressure continued because no one else had been placed inside that house, and no one else had access to a drug that matched what killed him. What investigators had not yet done was look carefully enough at the security footage. If you are new to this channel, this is where we go deeper than the surface. Subscribe now and hit the notification bell, so you never miss a new documentary. New stories drop every week, and you do not want to miss what comes next. The Whitmore estate security system had been installed in 2015 and upgraded in 2018. 14 camera positions covered the exterior gates, the driveway, the service entrance, the main foyer, the kitchen, the hallway outside the master suite, and the east staircase. Footage was stored on a private server in the basement and backed up to an off-site cloud service every 24 hours. Detectives had already reviewed the morning of March 14th and confirmed Rosa's arrival and movements exactly as she had described them. What they had not done, not at first, was pull the footage from the 72 hours before the discovery. When they did, the investigation changed completely. On the evening of March 12th, 36 hours before Gerald's body was found, a figure entered the estate through the rear service gate at 11:14 at night. The figure moved through the garden on a path that avoided the motion sensor floodlights entirely. They entered the house through a basement-level door that the system was not configured to flag as an alert. They moved through the kitchen. They went upstairs. 41 minutes after entering, they left the same way they had come. The interior lighting Gerald used at night made portions of the footage grainy, but the figure was visible. The route was deliberate. Whoever this was, they knew the house. Here is where the story becomes something else entirely. The basement door required a 6-digit access code that had been changed in February 2019, just weeks before Gerald's death, at Gerald's own request. According to the estate security company, only 3 people had been issued the updated code: Gerald himself, his estate manager, and his son Elliot. Rosa Delgado did not have it. Elliot Whitmore was 34 years old when his father died. He ran the acquisitions division of the development firm, a position Gerald had given him 6 years earlier, not because Elliot had fully earned it, but because Gerald believed a man's son should eventually lead his business. The relationship between them was, by most accounts, one of sustained and unresolved tension. Elliot pushed for aggressive expansion. Gerald preferred to consolidate. Elliot wanted autonomy. Gerald did not give it easily.
You are under
when
arrest,
detectives
Mr.
brought Elliot in,
this is a
he
mistake.
did not deny
Please
being at the
move.
estate that night. What he said was that he had stopped by to drop off documents his father had requested, signed paperwork related to a pending property transfer. He said his father had been awake, that they had spoken briefly, and that he had left without incident. He said his father had seemed fine. Detectives noted that Elliot had not mentioned any of this when initially questioned. In his first interview, he had said the last time he saw his father was at a family dinner 4 days earlier. When shown the footage, his account changed. The documents Elliot described could not be found anywhere in the estate. Gerald's personal phone showed no call or message from Elliot that evening. No one at the firm could confirm that any paperwork had been rushed or flagged as urgent in that window. And there was one more detail that quietly dismantled the digoxin angle against Rosa. The medication found in her apartment was in tablet form, her late mother's oral prescription. The digoxin in Gerald's bloodstream, according to the medical examiner's updated analysis, had been administered in liquid form. Injectable-grade digoxin, a controlled pharmaceutical formulation, not something available at a drugstore. An entirely different substance from what was sitting in Rosa's closet. Stay with this story. What comes next is what everything else was building toward. If you have not subscribed yet, do it now so this channel can keep bringing you investigations told the way they deserve to be told. In January 2019, 2 months before his death, Gerald Whitmore had updated his will. The changes were not minor. Under the previous version, his estate was divided evenly between Elliot and Brielle, with a separate endowment for a charitable foundation Gerald had established in his first wife's name. The revised will kept Brielle's share intact and increased the charitable endowment. Elliot's direct inheritance was reduced by more than 60%. In its place was a structured trust that would release funds to him incrementally over 20 years, contingent on his performance at the firm. Elliot had expected to inherit half of a $2.3 billion estate. What he was now set to receive if he waited was a fraction of that, controlled, conditional, and slow. Franklin Osei told investigators something else. In the months before his death, Gerald had been troubled by what he described as financial irregularities in the acquisitions division. He had not yet launched a formal investigation, but he had consulted with Franklin about his options. Franklin believed Gerald had been building toward a direct confrontation with Elliot, one that simply had not happened yet. Detectives executed a search warrant on Elliot's residence, his office, and his vehicle. Inside a locked drawer in his office credenza, they found a small insulated cooler of the kind used to transport temperature-sensitive medical items. Inside the cooler were 2 empty glass vials and 1 disposable syringe in its original sealed packaging. Both vials tested positive for trace amounts of pharmaceutical-grade injectable digoxin. A forensic accountant brought in to review the acquisitions division's books confirmed what Gerald had suspected. Over 18 months, Elliot had redirected approximately $4.1 million from development escrow accounts into a series of shell entities he controlled. The money had funded 2 personal real estate investments he had kept entirely off the firm's records. Elliot Whitmore was arrested 11 weeks after his father's death. He was charged with first-degree murder, financial fraud, and breach of fiduciary duty. The prosecution argued that Elliot had entered the estate on the night of March 12 knowing his father was alone, knowing that Gerald was closing in on the embezzlement, and knowing that the updated will had structurally cut him out of the inheritance he had built his plans around. The defense argued the footage was inconclusive, that the vials proved nothing about how the digoxin reached Gerald's body, and that the financial activity was unrelated to the death. They pointed again to the bottle in Rosa's apartment, and argued that the prosecution had simply switched suspects when the first story stopped working. The jury deliberated for 9 days. We are almost at the end of this story. If it has stayed with you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And subscribe to this channel. The next documentary is already waiting. On September 22, 2020, Elliot Whitmore was found guilty of first-degree murder. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Rosa Delgado was never charged. Prosecutors formally cleared her before the trial began. She received a private apology from the Greenwich Police Department and, through a civil settlement that was never publicly disclosed, a financial payment from the Whitmore estate that allowed her to retire from domestic service entirely. Brielle Whitmore did not speak publicly about her brother's conviction. Through her attorney, she released a single statement saying she was focused on preserving her father's legacy and the charitable foundation he had created in her mother's name. She assumed full control of the development firm and began the process of unwinding the shell entities her brother had built. Franklin Osei gave a brief interview after the sentencing. He said he believed Gerald had known something was wrong, that Gerald had felt something coming, even if he could not name it yet. But Gerald Whitmore had been a man who trusted almost no one, and even at the end, he had not moved fast enough to protect himself from the one person he had spent years protecting. There is something worth carrying from this story beyond the verdict. Rosa Delgado was suspected because she was present, because she had access, because she was the one who found the body and made the call, because there happened to be medication in her apartment that she had kept out of grief and never thought to discard. None of that was evidence. All of it was proximity. And proximity, when it is arranged to look like logic, can pass for proof to people who are not looking carefully enough. The security footage did not crack this case because it showed something dramatic. It cracked it because it showed something quiet. A man moving through a dark garden at 11 o'clock at night, on a path he had walked before, through a door only he and 2 others could open. The truth, when it finally arrived, was not loud. It never is. Gerald Whitmore spent a lifetime convinced that the people around him wanted what he had. In the end, the only one who wanted it badly enough to take it was the one person he had already given access to everything. That is the story. That is what the cameras showed. And that is what no one suspected, until it was the only answer left. And if you want more stories told this way, full investigations, real consequences, the truth without shortcuts, subscribe to this channel. There is always another story. And the next one goes even deeper.